Hola, ¿cómo estás? Bienvenido o bienvenida a este video. Hello and welcome to today's lesson. In today's class, I'm going to teach you every single tense in Spanish, so buckle up. Now, the ones we're going to see right now at the beginning of this video are arguably the most important tenses that you need to be focusing on. Just a note, I'm not going to go over the specific conjugations for each tense. I'm simply going to show you when and why we use them. If you'd like to learn the nitty-gritty and how we conjugate each of these tenses, click the link in the video description to check out our Fluent Spanish Speaker Academy. That's where you can learn all of the in-depth conjugation rules. Let's take a look. The first tense we have is the present simple, which is probably the one you're most familiar with. So for example, hablo español. I speak Spanish. That's just in the regular present tense. Or como tacos. I eat tacos. Remember that in Spanish, we have AR, ER, and IR verbs. What this means is we have verbs called infinitives. So for example, hablo right now is in the present simple. However, the original form of hablo is hablar. Okay, that's what we call an infinitive, and it ends with AR. Therefore, it is an AR verb. So hablar is an AR verb. Comer is an ER verb, and vivir, for example, is an IR verb. And those are the three kinds of infinitive verbs that we have in Spanish. So when we are conjugating verbs into different tenses, we're simply taking them from the infinitive form and then putting them into a new form. So in this case, the present simple, or we'll have the imperfect, so on and so forth. Now, there are 18 tenses in Spanish. I don't say this to overwhelm you. I actually am going to tell you that the four that we're going to look at right now are arguably the most important ones that you need to learn and master before worrying about moving on to any of the other tenses. So the four that we're going to look at right now in this first section are going to be the most important ones you need to focus on, okay? So, hablo español como tacos, all right? I speak Spanish, I eat tacos. There are different conjugation rules for an AR verb or an IR verb or an ER verb, okay? So for example, o, as, a, amos, an for AR verbs, whereas with ER verbs, we have o, es, e, emos, en. And for IR verbs, o, es, e, imos, en, okay? Like I said, you can learn all the nitty-gritty of the conjugation rules by clicking the link in the video description to check out our Fluent Spanish Speaker Academy. But the idea here is we're just speaking the present tense, okay? So I speak Spanish, I eat tacos, okay? Imperfect. This is very, very important, so please listen, okay? The imperfect is the past tense, and it's talking about things that were ongoing in the past, okay? We're also going to take a look at the preterite, which is for things that happened once in the past. They are one-time actions in the past, okay? If you remember anything from this video, let it be that, okay? The imperfect is for ongoing actions in the past, whereas the preterite is for one-time actions in the past. The number one tense that I see students struggle with is the imperfect, okay? Even if they're intermediate students, I see it all the time that students use the preterite when they should be using the imperfect and vice versa, okay? So at the end of this video, you should really be focusing on the present simple, the imperfect, the preterite, and also the informal future, which is what we're going to take a look at in a second, okay? So the imperfect, tocabas la guitarra, okay? This can translate to a few different things. You used to play the guitar, you would play the guitar, or you were playing the guitar. How do I know which translation is correct? Well, it just depends on the context of the sentence. So for example, tocabas la guitarra cuando eras niño. You used to play the guitar when you were a kid, or you would play the guitar when you were a kid. Be careful with the translation of would when it comes to the imperfect, because many students will confuse this with the conditional tense. Like, I would go to your party, but I'm busy, okay? That is not the same thing as the imperfect. Remember, the imperfect is for things that were ongoing in the past, okay? So, you used to play the guitar, okay? Or, hacíamos pan. So, we were making bread. We used to make bread. We would make bread. I need a little bit of extra context in order to choose which translation sounds the best, okay? So, hacíamos pan todos los sábados. For example, we used to make bread every Saturday, or we would make bread every Saturday. Or, hacíamos pan cuando entró mi papá. For example, we were making bread when my dad came in the room, okay? It's very common to have the imperfect play with the preterite. Remember, imperfect, ongoing actions in the past, whereas the preterite is for a one-time action in the past. So for example, cociné la pasta. I cooked the pasta. I wasn't cooking the pasta. I didn't used to cook the pasta. I cooked the pasta, okay? Tomamos agua. Now, careful. The reason I put it in the nosotros form is because when it comes to the preterite, notice how this is also the present simple conjugation. So I could say, tomamos mucha agua, for example. We drink a lot of water. Whereas here, tomamos agua could translate as we drink water or we drank water, okay? So how do we know the difference? Context clues. In this case, we don't have any extra context clues, so you might think that that just means we drink, okay? But here, what I'm trying to show you is that in the nosotros form, the conjugation is the same in the preterite and the present simple, okay? So, tomamos agua. We drank water. We were not drinking water. We did not used to drink water. We would not drink water. We drank water, okay? That's the big thing to understand. Imperfect, ongoing actions in the past. Preterite, one-time actions in the past. If you are an intermediate student, it is very important you remember that, because I see students all the time think that they're doing a great job, they have this incredible Spanish, but they still can't get it right. They can't get the preterite and the imperfect. That's why I say, arguably, these four tenses are the most important ones to get down, because the reality is, if you master this, you can speak in the present tense. Very important. If you master these, you can speak in the past tense. Arguably more important, because we're always speaking the past tense in Spanish. And finally, talking about the future, which I'm telling you, if you can do this, now you can speak in the past, present, and future, okay? So the simple future is what is used more often in Spain. It's not that we don't use it in Latin America, but it's more common we use what is called the informal future, okay? But first, let's take a look at the simple future, okay? So the simple future would be, for example, iré a la fiesta. I will go to the party, okay? The idea of the simple future is this idea of I will do something. You will go. We will laugh. They will make, okay? The idea is will, okay? Tendremos que volver. This is an irregular here. We will have to return, okay? We will have to return, okay? That's the idea of the simple future, okay? I will eat. You will do, so on and so forth. Whereas with the informal future, which is technically not a tense, this is what we'll use. We use a very, very simple formula, which is ir plus a plus infinitive, okay? So this verb meaning to go plus a, which is a preposition meaning to, and an infinitive verb. So something like hablar or comer or vivir, for example, okay? 90% of the time, this is what we're going to use in Latin America. And arguably, if you're from the United States, this is what we use most of the time when we speak in English, right? Oh, I'm going to the supermarket. I am going to see you there. Oh, you are going to like it. We are going to laugh, okay? Yeah, maybe I will say, oh, I will do, they will make, so on and so forth. But it's more common that we're going to use this, at least in Latin America. Okay, so for example, voy a ver. I am going to see. You might be wondering, voy is technically the present simple, meaning I go. However, we can use the present simple kind of like an ing verb in English if that thing is going to happen soon. So, voy a ver, I am going to see. And the idea is, I am going is going to happen soon. And therefore, it can take on that idea of going instead of go. So, voy a ver. Study this little formula. It's incredibly useful for speaking in the future tense, okay? So these are arguably the four most important tenses that you need to know and master in Spanish. If you're worried about the subjunctive mood, for example, but you still don't have the imperfect and preterite, forget about it. I didn't learn about the subjunctive mood until I had been learning Spanish for 4 years, okay? Many of my students will have been learning for 3 months and be like, man, I just can't master the subjunctive. I'm like, don't even worry about the subjunctive because you still need to get better and master the imperfect and the preterite. Okay, so focus on present simple, imperfect, preterite, and also the future, which I argue the informal future is a little bit better and also just easier to remember. Okay, let's continue looking at all the other tenses that we have in Spanish. All right, now let's take a look at these tenses. Please remember, these are not as important as the first 4 that we saw. Okay, so if you only remember 4 tenses from this entire video, let it be those first 4, okay? These next ones are not as important if you haven't mastered the other ones, okay? First up is the simple conditional. So something like, ¿podrías pasarme la sal? Could you? Okay, here we literally have the verb poder, meaning to be able to or to can. But here, this would mean could you or would you be able to? Okay, the conditional often takes the translation of would into English. Okay, so here, lo compraría, pero no puedo. I would buy it, but I can't. The idea here is that this is conditional upon something else. So I would buy this thing, but I can't because it's too expensive. For example, okay? ¿Podrías pasarme la sal? Could you pass me the salt? Is it possible? Okay? Not a guarantee you're going to pass me the salt, but I'm asking you, could you or would you? Okay, so the conditional takes on that translation of would in English. Remember, do not get this confused with the imperfect, okay? This is saying, oh, I would do this, but I'm not able to. Or, oh, you would, but you can't because whatever, okay? Whereas the imperfect is, oh yes, you would do this in the past, okay? All right, next, the present perfect, which actually is used quite a bit, okay? So for example, ¿has visto esta película? Have you seen this movie? Okay, so let's say I put this in the preterite and I said, ¿viste esta película? Did you see this movie? Whereas this would be, have you seen? Okay, so the idea of has meaning have you, okay, coming from the verb haber, meaning to have, not to physically have something, but to have done something, said something, eaten something, okay? ¿Has visto esta película? Have you seen this movie? This right here is what we call the past participle. And you may have seen it before with something like hecho en Mexico, made in Mexico, or visto, seen. I'm trying to think another one here. Visto, hecho, estado, right? Been, okay? Also, I underlined esta because do not pronounce this as está, okay? It's two different things. Está meaning is, whereas esta is the feminine meaning this, okay? It's the feminine singular, okay? Película is feminine and it's singular, so therefore we're going to use this, esta, okay? He estado aquí antes. I have been here before, okay? I have been, okay? That is the present perfect and we use it quite a bit, okay? Quick note, the present perfect is more often used in Spain. Of course, it is still used in Latin American countries. However, in Spain, they will typically use this to talk about things that they've recently done. So for example, hoy he ido al supermercado. Today, I have been to the supermarket. What they're really trying to say is, today I went to the supermarket. So in Spain, it sounds kind of a bit formal to the English-speaking brain, especially if you're from the United States. In the US, we would just use the idea of the preterite, which would mean, today I went to the supermarket. I wouldn't say, oh yes, today I have been to the supermarket. Sounds a bit weird and a bit formal, okay? Next, the past perfect. So something like no me había dicho, once again coming from the verb haber, okay? So she had not told me or he had not told me, okay? Had, here's the idea. She had not told me, okay? So once again, we're seeing that past participle there. Ya la había comido. I had already eaten it. So whereas this is have, right? This is going to be had, okay? Next, the preterite perfect, which I never use and I never hear people use, but it is a tense in Spanish, so we can take a look. Cuando hubo salido, empecé a llorar. So when she had left, I began to cry. Truthfully, don't worry about this. I never hear people say this. I live in Mexico and I never hear people say this, okay? Future perfect. Habré terminado mis estudios en junio. So I will have, okay? I will have, once again, we have that past participle. I will have finished my studies in June, okay? So here we have I will have, I had, and I have. Once again, if this is overwhelming, don't worry because yes, you can use these, but we don't use them nearly as much as those first four tenses that we took a look at, okay? All right, also, I underlined junio because, just a quick side note, we do not capitalize the months or days in Spanish, okay? So junio will never be capitalized. It will always be lowercase. Let's move on to the next tenses. All right, let's continue. Remember, the very first four tenses that we saw are the most important to master. So if you haven't mastered them, please disregard this for now and just focus on those 4 tenses. Okay, let's move on. The conditional perfect, okay, something like habría preferido quedarme en casa. I would have preferred to stay at home, okay? I would have. It's a weird thing because we have the idea of would and then we have haber, which haber can be a tricky word, meaning to have, basically, okay? So, once again, we really don't use this that much. It's not very common, okay? Present subjunctive, okay, this is where it starts to get a little bit more tricky. Now, please understand, and I'm going to underline this, the subjunctive is not a tense. I repeat, the subjunctive is not a tense. So many people say, oh man, I really struggle with the subjunctive. And what they're typically talking about is this, the present subjunctive. However, the subjunctive is a mood, okay? We have 3 different moods in Spanish. The indicative, which are everything we've looked at up until this point, okay? So things of fact, okay, things that are real. Whereas the subjunctive is for things of doubt, okay? It can also be used for opinions and emotions, but the overarching theme here with the subjunctive is that it's used for things of doubt, okay? Indicative, things that are real and true. The subjunctive, things of doubt. Remember that, okay? We also have the imperative mood, which is essentially just commands. I don't even know why we call it a mood, okay? So, subjunctive is a mood, okay? It can be used in the present, past, and future tense, okay? So let's take a look. Present subjunctive. Quiere que vaya a la fiesta. So for example, he wants me to go to the party, okay? Or she wants me to go to the party. Now notice how this verb, ir, has become vaya instead of voy, okay? The reason being is that just because he wants me to go to the party does not guarantee that I'm actually going to go to the party. There is doubt, and therefore we use the subjunctive mood. Now, the subjunctive mood is hard for us as English speakers because in English, I would not change this word to go. So if I say, I go to the party, or he wants me to go to the party, that word go stays the same in both of those situations. Whereas in Spanish, the spelling of the word changes. So instead of saying quiere que voy, now we have quiere que vaya. Once again, because there is doubt. Just because he wants that doesn't mean it's actually going to happen. Therefore, we use the subjunctive mood, okay? Recomienda que tome las pastillas. He recommends that I take the pills, okay? It's not a guarantee I'm going to take the pills. Just because he recommends them to me doesn't mean that I'm actually going to take them. Therefore, we use the subjunctive mood. There is doubt. Like I said, the subjunctive mood can also be used for things like opinions and emotions, but the most common use of the subjunctive is for things of doubt. Now, you may have been taught this acronym, WEIRDO, which I absolutely despise. It basically talks about when you should use the subjunctive mood. Oh, for wishes and emotions and yada, yada, yada. It just gets confusing. In the real world, when you're having a real conversation with someone, you're not going to think, is this a weirdo verb? Of course not. You're going to be thinking about, is this the right sentence structure? Is this the right word? How do I say that? Oh, okay. So when it comes to subjunctive, the easiest thing to remember is there doubt? Okay? Yes, there's doubt. I will use the subjunctive. No, there's no doubt. I will use the indicative. Sometimes when it comes to emotions and opinions, for example, you should have used the subjunctive, but it's not the end of the world because in Spanish, if you use the indicative mood when you should have used the subjunctive, a native Spanish speaker is still going to understand you. Okay, next, the imperfect subjunctive, which is arguably one of the hardest tenses for us to master. Quería que lloviera. Okay, I wanted it to rain. Okay, it's not a guarantee that it was going to rain. I wanted it to rain, but does that mean it was going to rain? Not necessarily. Therefore, we're going to use lloviera. This gets confusing because we're speaking in the past tense. So didn't this already happen? How can there be doubt if this already happened? Well, the idea is in the moment, this is what I wanted. In that moment, that's what I wanted to happen, but it wasn't a guarantee that it was going to happen. So we'll use the subjunctive. Quería que lloviera, okay? Necesitaba que me llamara. I needed her to call me, okay? Or I needed that she were to call me. It wasn't a guarantee that she was going to call me. Just because I needed that doesn't mean that it was going to happen. There's doubt, and therefore we use the subjunctive, okay? Necesitaba que me llamara, okay? Careful here. It's not llamará, okay? It's llamara, okay? In Spanish, the natural emphasis on a word falls on the second to last vowel, okay? So here's our last vowel. Remember that the vowels are A, E, I, O, U, or in Spanish, A, E, I, O, U. Here's our last vowel, and the natural emphasis on this word falls on the second to last vowel, which in this case is the A. So it's llamara, okay? It's not llamará, okay? That's that future tense, okay? Llamara, okay? I'm going to erase it here, okay? All right? Next, the future subjunctive, which truthfully we never use. This was used way back in the day. You might see it in literature, but no one uses this when speaking. Okay, so a donde fueres, haz lo que vieres. Wherever you may go, do what you see. Okay, it's kind of like saying when in Rome. Okay, but this is very poetic and coming from literature. We never use this when speaking in the real world. Okay. And finally, the present perfect subjunctive. So, espero que hayas dormido bien. I hope that you have slept well, okay? Now, once again, we're seeing that verb haber, okay? But here, we're using the subjunctive mood. Why? Because I hope that you have slept well. It doesn't mean that you have slept well, okay? If I were to say to you, has dormido bien, that's a fact. You have slept well. Whereas here, I'm saying, oh, I hope that you have slept well. Espero que hayas dormido bien, okay? It's not a guarantee that you have slept well. Okay, we only have 4 more. Let's take a look. All right, we're almost done. Número 15, the pluperfect subjunctive. So for example, me hubieras dicho. You should have told me, okay? You were to have told me, all right? In this case, typically it takes on the transition of should have. I should have done this. You should have called me, okay? Hubiera estudiado más. I should have studied more, okay? So typically you could argue that because this is the subjunctive, it's an opinion or an emotion. So it's my opinion that I should have studied more. Or, oh, you should have told me, okay? But it already happened, it's done, ni modo, okay? But this is what you should have done, okay? Next, the future perfect subjunctive, which no one uses. This is just used in literature. I never use this, and you're never going to hear a native Spanish speaker in the modern world use this. Okay, so si no hubiere llamado, llamen a la policía. So if I will have not called, call the police. No one uses this. It's just coming from literature. Okay, and finally, the affirmative imperative, dame eso. Okay, so when you hear the imperative, it just means a command. Technically, it's a mood in Spanish. I don't know why they consider it a mood. It's just confusing. It's simply a command. So, dame eso. Give me that, okay? This right here is what we call an object pronoun, okay? In this case, it's the indirect object pronoun because technically I could say something like dámelo, and then I would have, you know, for example, give it to me, okay? But da is the command, okay? Next, ven acá, another command, very common. Come here, ven acá, come over here. Like if a mom is mad at her kid, very normal, you're gonna hear this. Mijo, ven acá, okay? And finally, the negative imperative, which is just a negative command. So, no hagas eso, don't do that. Or, nunca uses groserías, never use swear words, okay? So, positive commands, negative commands. I know this is a long video. Muchas gracias por ver el video. If you've gotten till the end, congratulations. Like I said, if you still haven't mastered those 4 tenses at the beginning of the video, focus on those. The simple future, imperfect, present, and the informal future, okay? So click the link in the video description if you'd like to check out our Fluent Spanish Speaker Academy. Our goal is to help you have a 10-minute conversation in 90 days without feeling unconfident. So check it out by clicking the link in the video description. Muchas gracias. Hasta luego.